So, what does the FBI, PlayStation, and Google all have in common? They all need top talent. And throughout his career, Jevic has been the go-to expert helping companies like these hire the right people, especially black talent in tech. From the NCAA to the SaaS industry, Jevic has 15 years of experience in cultivating partnerships that drive diversity and innovation. And today we'll be sharing his journey and insights on shaping the future of tech talent acquisition. It's great to have you on the show, Jevic.
Juan, thank you. Love that. I didn't know where you're gonna go with that intro, but I love it. I was like, hey, I was like, what do they have in common?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, one of the things that this is actually ties very deeply into like the mission of this show is basically helping to understand or dissect all of the different pieces about getting more black talent into these roles, these opportunities. And I usually start at the very beginning because the way opportunity works is that people got to first be aware. So for you, one, how did you get aware about these opportunities existing? And then if I could tack on to that is how do you see that also happening across the community? Because we're not always the most represented in tech. And so from your perspective, why is that?
Yeah. To answer the first part, like for me, it was just early on. I've always been like a tech geek. Like throughout high school and college, I actually worked at Radio Shack. I worked at Best Buy. So I was always like into like tech and like devices and everything like that. And then like when I had to choose a university, I chose Suffolk University because they had a really strong entrepreneurship program. It was top 25 in the country, and every time people think of entrepreneurship, it's starting your own business. But I've read like a lot of startup organizations, a lot of tech startups, they're actually hiring entrepreneurship majors because they wanted those managers to treat their segment of the company as their own kind of business. So that's kind of how I was aware. Like I was just always been like a little tech geek, from like kind of growing up there. And then I was like, hey, my university, I was like, I really focus on like startups, like small businesses. Like I really went with a lot of like talented individuals that have made their own companies, and it got me aware of other organizations. So I think that's always been in the forefront for me there. And then our community, honestly, it's like conversations like this. It's just like having more conversations, letting people know like what you do. Honestly, every like Uber ride I have, people just like, hey, like, and if they hear me on the phone like with a client or I'm talking to one of my mentees, they're just always curious. They're like, hey, like, actually, what do you do? And then I explain to them, like, hey, I do this. This is where I come from. I was like, yes, you can do it too as well. And I think always like I think that last part too as well, encouraging folks like, hey, you can do this as well. Like if with the hard work and the ethic that you have, you can definitely jump in. Tough to get in there, but like that's that's why I work with for a lot of good organizations to try to bring more access to them to these opportunities.
So on the access part in your work with your organization, I know that you're affiliated with Blavity, right? So what are some of the things or the work that the community is doing? How do you see, m- what can be done to kind of like scale up this work? Because the reason I ask that is when I used to lead a nonprofit, that was, connected to like helping, black talent and other minorities break into tech. One of the things that became obvious is that it's not something that you can help one person. I mean, every person that you help cross that, divide is definitely a win. But if you're going to make the kind of impact that's required for that to make a dent, you have to be able to do it at scale. So, talking about the scale of it, how does that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to make one correction there. So I was at Blavely as of like 2 weeks ago. I am a free agent out there, but huge fan of that organization, especially Afrotech.
Got it.
The leaders there, folks there, still like clients me up every day going through there. So nothing but great things to say about that org, and especially like
Okay.
Afrotech conference coming up in November. Yeah, like days are coming all in between. But to go at scale, like you need help from large organizations like to go at scale,
Mm,
right? Because it's like, hey, like especially you talk about nonprofit, like Blavity too as well, for example. It's only about like 200 employees, right? Because there's only so much an organization at that size can actually do to help the lift, right? Without having
mm,
great partners, like you mentioned before, like a PlayStation, like a Google, like the FBI that has, over 10,000, some of these close to 100,000 employees that they can actually, it's like, hey, like we need to hire, like every year we need to hire 100 people or every quarter. So I think working with large organizations that they need the help actually. They're like, hey, they actually have the funds, they have the capital, they have the resources, but they honestly don't have the connections, which is crazy to see. It's like they need like our expertise, and our folks is like, okay, y'all know how to do this, and you know how to do it authentically, right, and very genuine,
mm,
and speak the language of people speak, right? Because we can just dress like this. I got my Patriots gear on. You're chilling, like, but we still know what we're doing there. So I think you need to have an organization that's really mission driven, but then you need help from these large organizations that have the capital and have the resources, and they're just huge. Then that's how you can really do it at scale.
mm. And to kind of like tie back to your own career, right? Like from being an athlete to starting your professional career. What are some of the common threads that you've seen in your career that's helped that progression?
Yeah, my career specifically, like I think just being an athlete, it's just like I think is especially basketball, right? There's so much work you need to do individually, like in the off season or something like that, that no one's looking at. That you're up and done. It's no Instagram, no frills, no frills to it. But then like sometimes they don't see that work right until like the season, and then you actually need team players, right? I'm not no good of what I do without a great team behind me, because like,
Mm,
hey, I can get that deal done, with PlayStation, with the FBI, but I'm promising them certain deliverables. If like my customer success team's not on point, if my conference operations team's not on point there, if talent and programming is like the schedule's all messed up, I can't be as good without that whole team in place. Because even if
mm,
you can't be a star without a team, right? So I think that's what kind of
mm,
helps me, like being an athlete there, and then honestly being super competitive, right? So it's like, and like all my friends will say, I'm competitive in everything that we do. Like Uno, no one wants to play Uno against me. Like I'm here to win. I was like, what are the rules? Like tell me everything. Like I want to make sure like I'm winning a fair game. So like being very competitive and just relentless, right?
mm,
Just like relentless. So I think that part of being an athlete, that
mm.
individual work, but making sure you know how to play with the team too as well. Having that balance, because yeah, you're not good without a team.
Absolutely. That really makes sense. And talking about the work behind the scenes that nobody sees, it's one of the most understated, parts of success in general, right? Like, everybody likes the story of overnight successes. And I think there's something in there, right? Because, I think for most people, we're going to be average, right? In most of the things that we do. So I think there's something that's very alluring, right? About like someone who's that person just getting that success. It's almost unthinkable to think that, you have to go do this backbreaking work and like put in all this hours just to get there. So it's easier to just say, you know what, he did this. And that's why like you see a lot of those stories, whether it's like, I bought some stocks and then, he just blew up overnight and I become a millionaire, or it's like do cybersecurity for 2 weeks and now you're making six figures, right? Like it's the same exact thing. But people who've done it, who've been in those situations, understand that hard work is like a key piece of it. I look at even like, the company that you used to be at, even the work that you do to build a platform like that, it doesn't happen overnight. The trust that you build, you might even have the platform, but people want to see like, do you have the longevity? Like, we don't want a one trick pony. We want a partner that, we can always show up to every single year and make, because big companies like that too, that have, big talent pools, they don't make decisions on, we're going to do this one time and then it's done.
Never.
They make 10-year plans. They will roll out that. So for you to be that person who's going to be able to receive that kind of partnership, you also have that longevity going for you, right? So again, I guess that's a long-winded way of asking, like, how important is that, work that nobody sees in building you up to be what you need to be?
Yeah, number one, it's it. And I always say this phrase: "There's always luck in part of it." Like let's not get it twisted. There's been luck, part of my career, just being in the right place at the right time. Having really good mentors in place that can help me out. But I always say the harder you work, usually the luckier you get too as well. So it's like, hey, like that one trick, but the harder you work, the luckier you get. But like, luck is definitely a part of any success story. Any person can tell you that. Like, hey, coming in an organization at the right time, hey, having the right leader, the right manager, the right mentor, the right people that are talking about you like throughout the room. Like, luck definitely plays a role in it. But I think the harder you work, the luckier you get, and then the different opportunities that open up right there for you. I remember like one time, like I was struggling. This might have been like 10 years ago or something like that. And I was just so used to like working like retail hours at Best Buy. So I would go in the office on Saturdays while no one was there, get some stuff done, like, going through it. Then like my manager came in one day. He goes, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "Yeah, I usually come in some Saturdays and stuff like that, just get work done." I used to tell no one the office was open, so I could come through. But he was like, that helped him right there. He didn't see like he's like, "Damn, this guy this does this." And then he kind of like went further and looked at reports. It was like, "Oh, he's actually doing this like on Saturdays, right?" But he had no idea that I was doing that. I consistently do that. It would just like help me out there. But that part's important, absolutely. And like I think that's a part of being an athlete. Like you kind of gotta love the journey, right? Like I like the work. I think we talked about it before. Like before like working out, it's like you're not gonna see it overnight, right? Like I like the journey. It's like, hey, here am I at month one. Here am I gonna go to month two, month three, and now, hey, it's summertime. You're ready to show out.
Absolutely, and that's so important and interesting, right? Because I think it plays a big role in it just as you said, like in that development process. So, speaking specifically about, talent development for people who are interested in that, what are the key skills? What are the key like attributes that someone who's interested in that role, to start to develop both soft and technical skills?
Absolutely. So I think one thing that helped me out, like one of my first jobs, like right out of
Mm,
school, I was basically like consultant for. It was more to B2C. It was my first
mm,
experience at B2C. So I worked for an insurance startup. So I didn't work for Liberty Mutual. I didn't work for Geico, but I worked for this. Basically, think about it as Expedia for insurance. And what I would do is
mm,
like, hey, Jawan, like I see you have Liberty Mutual. You're paying $200 a month. That's a little too high, right? Like I'm gonna like shop you around the market and find out like what is like the best here for you, and finding out like what's best for you. Like, hey, where do you drive to? Like, how many cars are your kids coming with you? But really being like a consultant, right there,
mm,
because like my biggest thing is retention is the biggest thing for me
mm,
and being that business development, right? So it's like, hey, like, and then a lot of times, like, hey, this might not be best for you. It's like when you have someone being able to say no. I was like, hey, and not
mm.
forcing it because my brand goes over any brand. It's a Jevic brand. It
Got
goes
it.
over,
Mm,
the Wayfair brand I was at, over Blavity brand. It's my brand because like I got clients right now. Like, hey, where are you going to next? Stay in touch because I want to work for you. I like working
mm,
with you and like what you do. So I think putting forefront is like number one is just knowing your brand is over everything. So that's one.
mm,
Number two, connecting with that person, like figuring out like, all right, what is best for this person? It's like, hey, is it just more hiring more people? Is it like, hey, this specific set of people, this like injury, like no, we specifically need people in land. We're opening a new office there. It's like, okay, like who is this deal? Because you right, I'm usually speaking to one person or like 3 to 5 people, but there's other people
mm,
involved too as well. How can I make you shine and make you look good to your bosses? Right? All
mm.
right, got that. Write that down. And then I think it's a consistency of communication and being very transparent. Because like clients are going to come at you sometimes with some demands that are like, and I'll let them know it's like, hey, I can't do this. Like this like won't work. Like this is what I can do though. And just being very transparent with them. It's like, if this works for you, like we're on the same page. If not, maybe this is not the best time for us to start this relationship, or maybe like this not the certain product, but not being afraid to say like no to as well. I think especially being this real, like everyone thinks it's always yes, yes. You got somebody, so now it's like, hey, we want to make sure this is the right fit. It's like retention is the game for me. So then two is right, because if that person says no too as well, it's like, hey, like Juwan, this is not the right fit. I see some of the goals you're trying to do. Like maybe our product's gonna like change, or maybe like where you are in your company is gonna change. But like, let's stay in touch. And then Juwan's like, hey, like man, I just like how that person spoke to me and everything like that. My previous company, this actually would be a good for. Or like, hey, like one of my partners over here was just talking about this solution. Jevic, let me put you in touch with them. So I think just people helping people, man. At the end of the day, that's what I try to say. It's that simple.
That's such a key factor. And talking about people being people, and like, people being a resource, you know, networking is such a big part of succeeding in tech, regardless of the roles. I imagine in this role, it's probably even more so. So, what are some of your strategies for building networks? Like, for example, if you had to pick three things that are really important in building a network, because it's a buzzword, like everybody says it, but one, what does it really mean? And how do you actually do it? What are the actionable steps?
Yeah, great question. I'll use an example today. I had somebody reach out to me. Actually, he reached out to me because my LinkedIn post, he saw someone I was connected to. So he's like, hey, like, I'm trying to make a shift in my career. I would love to kind of like pick your brain. We had a really good conversation. He lives in Houston. What I did was like, oh, there's a Houston tech event. I reached out to him, like adding value to people. So it's like, hey, here's a Houston tech event. I'm not going to be there, but I think this will be really cool for you. Right. So just reached out. What he did actually today, which was really good for him, he reached out. I was like, hey, like, I know you told me about this event. I'm going. Are you actually going to be there? I was like, no, like, still not going to work in my schedule. And then I told him a couple of tips. It was like, hey, what you're doing is really good. Make sure beforehand, if they show you an attendee list, like who you want to kind of connect to beforehand. Like, number one, do your research, right? So it's like, is there certain people that are also attending this event you want to meet? If not a lot of places will show you attendees too, but is there certain speakers and if there's certain speakers, it's like, hey, these speakers, are you trying to connect with these speakers or the company they work for? And then three, it's like, hey, is this a sponsored event? Like, who's actually sponsoring this event? Reach out to them, see how you can connect it. So it's always actually the work beforehand. Any networking event, I would say, is do your research beforehand and reach out. So like, hey, 3 to 5 people I'm trying to connect with. 2, actually at the event, try to like meet them, try to connect with them right over there. And then 3 is that follow-up, man. That follow-up is really important, right? When I go to like, I'm an event like every month, it's really difficult for me to like keep up. I'm not like, some people think I don't work a room at all. Like, I'm really trying to meet there's people on my list I'm trying to meet, like 3 to 5 people. Whoever comes up to me, great, I'll be cordial. But I'm not trying to meet 100 people like at all. I'm trying to really make genuine connections for folks, and then like keeping going, because that's how like I look at. Like, I might even my LinkedIn. I don't think I accepted you on LinkedIn until like, hey, let's chat. I want to see like face to face, because if someone in my network like reaches out to me like, hey, who is this person? I was like, hey, I spoke to him actually when I was in Vermont. Really good thing. I went on his podcast. This is what he does. Like, I can actually speak to who that person is, versus I'm just 1,000 people like connect me on LinkedIn, connect me on LinkedIn. That's just my strategy, like personally, and what I do. And like, I think making sure to add value, right? So like, I see what you're doing this podcast. What I'm going to do to continue this is like with my contacts, it's like, hey, there's a couple people that want to get on this podcast. I know really good contacts, focused on tech, focused on Black in tech. Let me put it on to you. And that's how I'm going to keep this relationship going between me and you as well.
So y'all see, like, it's not just even strategy, but strategy in motion. Like, you're already committing to the things that you're going to do. And I think that's a very, very a practical way to look at it. I know like strategies will be different. You're very like hands-on, want to be connected. Other people might have other different ways. But I think there's a lot of validity in that because for a lot of people, people don't want to be, everybody wants to be treated specially, you know. I think we all want to feel special. And the fact that you take that time to build that connection and to add value, I think that definitely resonates well with a lot of people. And of course, probably, you know, plays a big role in like why you've been able to be successful.
And one networking trick that's really helped me, and especially if you're going to a lot of events and trying to meet with people, I actually got this down, not even a networking event. I got this down one of my buddy's wedding in Houston. Like I told you, I'm always in Houston. I don't know why. That's really my second home. But it was like 2 or 3 years ago. Someone was like, hey, you really got to go to this restaurant. And the owner of the restaurant just happened to be at the hotel. And then I was like, hey, like, we're going to go to your restaurant later, da, 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 da. He takes out his phone and he just, I was like, what? And he said, all right, now I know who you are. Here's your phone number. So now, like, when I meet people, I do that. So what I do is like, hey, when we connect, you know, we have a good conversation. I take a video with them right there in the spot. And I put it in our email thread or a text message or LinkedIn. So like now it's like, it's not just a face to a name. I got to see like, hey, what was that person wearing? What was kind of our vibe? Like, especially when you put someone on the spot, like on a video, you can see like if they're awkward, the pit, like you don't know how they're going to kind of react. But it's helped me a lot to actually remember people and everything like that. I can always go back. I was like, here's the video and memories like right there. So that's like one like really physical thing. Like people like, hey, if you're having a tough time when you're networking and trying to keep like who's who and who, like take a picture, take a video of someone like right there and start that text message or email thread with that video or picture.
You know, it's interesting. I've tried the picture one, but I've never done the video one. So another thing to add to my list. So you know, you've had different roles, like being an account executive, advertising sales manager. What are the kind of like common themes in those roles, and like what is it like? Similar skill sets, different skill sets. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think number one, I think in all the roles is like the curiosity. Like I'm always like curious to like, hey, why an organization come to me, or like, hey, why is this organization important for our company to build with? So I'm very like curious, like, hey, how do they like generate like money here? Like, what are they expanding to? But I think that curiosity and learning, I'm just like a really like curious person. So I think that curiosity has always helped there. And then two, like most recently, it's always involved coaching. Like that's something I want to do after retire. Like everyone's right now is like, hey, you're gonna start your own thing, da 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 da. I was like, no, like I'm actually going to start my own thing, but it's not going to do anything with tech. Actually, it's going to be focused on like coaching youth basketball, like very far away from this. But like a big part of me is coaching teams, right? So like especially like, hey, first time managers or like SDRs, people like first in the professional realm, but like a big part of my thing's been coaching, like coaching people and teaching. So I know like, and I always say this in interviews, like, and people see the manager, director role, like part of my profile. Like I hate managing people. It throws a recruiter off completely. Like what? Like I was like, I coach and I teach. The admin stuff of like showing up to work on time, this like I don't deal with it. Like my team, I'm kind of an asshole there, to be honest. I was just like, hey, y'all show up on time and do this, and then let's have fun. Like the fun part for me is coaching, teaching different strategies. Like let's strategize. Like that's always been like a big part of all my roles.
That's so key. So, and how do you almost navigate that world? It's because I asked that because I think one of the things that I've seen, some of my friends had to go through, even in their tech careers, is like there's some things that you really want to do that you enjoy doing, and there's some part that you don't really enjoy doing. But in many cases, you can't have one without the other. So how do you blend those worlds? And I'm asking that, especially for, people who are new in tech, understanding the nuance of balancing, like, what you really enjoy and what you don't enjoy as much.
Yeah. Honestly, this has even been as like a student, like whatever I don't want to do, I honestly try to get it out first. I was like, all right, like if I got to do people's like timesheets or like expense reports, like It's not fun. Like, let me get this done like right away first. So then I reward myself with like, hey, the fun part. Let me look at this coaching plan and let me listen to this phone call and see if different techniques they could have used at this. So that's always been my thing. It was like, or like, I have a tough homework assignments. Like, let me get the tough thing out first. Like when I'm fresh too as well, right? Like when I'm fresh too as well, like let me get this out of the way and I'm using my full energy on this. And then I reward myself with the fun part there. Because in every job, there's going to be something that, you don't like everything the same, right? So that's always been like my part there, because I've realized early on, like if I try to do the opposite, for me personally, it's like, then that work that I don't want to do, I'm doing it last, and I'm not in the best mindset. It's probably not going to be my best work now. It's something I don't want to do, and like I already invested my energy elsewhere. So yeah, that's why I try to like, hey, let me tackle this down now, and then I see what I want to do. It's like, all right, the reward is right there for you, right? Like in the gym, I was like, all right, let me get my 2 miles in before I can really start lifting. I was like, got to get this cardio in, and then I can do, my fun stuff that I want to do after.
And it's so interesting that you say that, because, one of the things that I realized, kind of like tying back to the initial question about, the work that nobody sees. I was having a very interesting conversation with maybe I'd say mentee yesterday, right? And we were talking about this idea of, you know, how much is too much, right? Like, and a lot of people don't have a good reference for that. For example, like I saw a tweet even today where a guy was talking about being out of a job for like, 17 months at this point and applied to about 237 jobs. And I'm like,
Oof.
I hope you get something soon, right? But if you like in this job market right now, in my mind, like 237 is too low, even for 1 month.
Wow.
To do that in 17 months. And again, maybe people's strategies are different, but like, if you think about it, there's so much talent in the market. There's so many people applying that in the 2021 market where that was very different, you probably, maybe if you were qualified, you were maybe one of 10 people who were qualified, which means that for every like 100 roles that you apply to, you probably get called back from like 5 to 10. That number is significantly increased. So it just means that it's such a numbers game. Literally what I was telling her was like, you got to put in more numbers. Like strip out like the cover letter, strip out every other thing that's taking time and just go hard at applying, because you don't know. So for the job search in 2024, at least what I know that's worked for me and other people, is that there's so many like things, like whether the company is trying to close a role quickly and they just need someone, or maybe they're rural. Like it's always some nuance thing like that that's helping you out in this market, because so many people out there looking. So the biggest thing that'll hurt your chances is not putting in that extra shift. So again, but I think it goes back to a theme, right? A general theme about how important is, for some things, not even counting, having a mindset where it's like you're not, really counting and just doing till you get the result. Because I think oftentimes people don't have a good frame of reference for like how much it's going to take. Have you dealt with that in your career? And like, how have you navigated those situations where like it almost feels like there's no end in sight, but you just keep doing it till you find success?
No, this is really good. Because you thought 237 was too low, right? I thought it was too high. Because it's really good. There's like two very different opinions, right? Just because like, and then I'll answer your question. But to go to this, I think as long as number one, you got to have like a strategy or book was like, hey, what's your goal at 237 is like, hey, I'm applying to 40 jobs like per week. Like that's my job. So like I can break that eight per day, Monday through Friday, X, Y, and Z. For me personally, at that point, and then I'm going to go back to your question. I mean, I can't name you the last time I actually applied for a job and got it. Like my last 5 roles, I never applied. It's through just conversations that I have. But that's where I'm at in my career now, right? And I always tell people like kind of this, right? Because I'm a hiring manager. Like before any time I put an application down, I'm having conversations, my network, because my network is large enough. So, but I know before I was hiring like last December, before that role was up for like 2 weeks, I already talked to 10 people, and I already had one person I really wanted, like already, like to that point. So like sometimes like to that front, like sometimes if you're already like applying, you might be too late in this market, like already, just using like me, for example. But what I do is just like, I have conversations like for this conversation right now, people going to know like I'm in the market because I'm speaking to it. And maybe that might lead to something, right? Because I'm very particular. And I think you got to be very particular of what you want to do. Like for me, I'm looking for a really like mission-driven organization. Has to do with like women leadership, black leadership, like very specific. I like I think I like too as well, like smaller organizations that I can like. I've had in the previous conversations and previous orgs, I've gone in phone calls with clients with my CEO, right? And that's something I like. My CEO like knows how to pronounce my name. I'm not just like a number, but that's what I like, right? So I think people need to get like really focused, hyper focused of like, hey, what size company you want to work for? What type of leaders you want to work for? Like, get very specific there. Now to go back to your question, sorry, but I just had to do that.
No, 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 no. That's a
Because
good
we're very
perspective.
like, because we're very different, which is good, right? Because it's not one fits the other, right? And it matters
Yeah.
what type of person you are too as well. So that's with me with coaching too as well, right? Because I'll have that person that like, hey, they needed, do 200 phone calls a day to get to the goal, or have that person like they're good on 10 phone calls a day and they'll hit that. And then sometimes I have that fight with leadership. It's like, well, you can push that person 10 to do 20, but it's like, no, then their efficiency is going to go down and they're going to get more burnt out. Because I'm very like big on like emotions and people's like EQ and everything like that. But to go back, I think your question is like, how do you know like when is too much and when you're just going for something when there's like kind of no insight? Am I phrasing that correctly?
Yeah, like so again, it kind of like ties back to the original question of like, for example, like this reference point. And I think you've answered part of it, but I'll help you reshape it
Yeah.
so you can land it. It's like you've already said it, it's the strategy, right? So for some people, I like the sales example. For some people, it's gonna be that, you're looking at it as big ticket sales, right? Where it's like it's not about the volume. It's about, the attention to detail, the value, right? But in like, if you're selling like, mass market products, like you have to get those reps in. But even in both cases, like a lot of people don't typically have a good frame of reference for how many is too many or how long is too long. So for example, like if we use the, 90 days, 90K in cybersecurity, a lot of people are going to feel like they failed after 90 days because that's not what somebody pitched. But there's no other data point. It takes 90 days, right? Or did the person who studied for 90 days, was it 90 minutes or 9 hours every single day? Because you could do it in 90 days, but like how much time are you putting in? Is that the only thing you're doing? Or do you do that for like a few minutes after work? So it's like a lot of people oftentimes don't have that, right perspective. And that then leads to not quitting. But some other people, even when they don't have that, they just keep going with a mindset of, what, I don't know how long this is going to take.
I'm just going to go.
But I'm just going to keep going. So I know like for you to be in sales, in retail, even like all your career, you've probably dealt with that situation. So like, how have you navigated ambiguity in that sense when you don't know, but still fought your way to success?
Yeah, so I always challenge people. So something I learned from one of my COOs like 10 years ago, I really go on that individual, right? Because on that individual, it can change. So what I go back into, if we're talking about sales, it's like, all right, how much money has this person generated? Let's say $100,000. How many calls did it take that person to generate that much money it's going through? So it's like, hey, on average, this person needs to make this call to that. But it could be that person, hey, Joe needs 55 calls, but Sarah only needs 25. So I kind of go through the reference. I always do this in every company I go to. I go to everyone's like, hey, this is how much money you've made, and this is how much like calls or meetings it took per per month or per quarter it took you to go there. And I try to like, depending on the sale, like, hey, we can go by quarter so you can kind of see the trend, right? And then I want that person kind of see, they got to know themselves, right? And I did this for Wayfair, and these were like very new reps going through. So I had them, we were in a whiteboard, and every one of them, we did math problems. Like, this is how much money you did. This is how many people you talked to. This is how many people you had meetings with. So it was like, all right, it took me that many calls to get this many meetings. It took me this many meetings to get that there. So I think with that framework, it kind of helps. So then I was like, once everyone has that, right? But when you have someone new, like, where do you kind of go? For me, I kind of let them figure it out, right? Like, for me, like, I'm very hands off at first. Even if I hear something that's like completely off, as long as, you know, it's ethical and everything like that, cause like I gotta just see where they're starting with, right? I can't say, hey, there's a problem here. Maybe like I'm just not good at it, but it works for them, right? Because everyone's really different. And sometimes it frustrates my team because they'll see me like I'm coaching someone else and stuff like that. I was like, y'all different. I kind of gotta let you go to see where our starting point is, and I need data. I can't coach without any data at all. That's how I coach. And then I see the data. It's like, okay, here's some of the issues there, like the where you're going, this how much money you generated. This is what I think you're going to go to. And I challenge people to challenge me. Like, this is what I kind of see. But if you don't see that, you continue to do it your way, and then we'll have the same conversation next month. We'll see where to go. But if not, I always give people time to kind of figure it out. You got to do it my way because I know this is successful now. Like, I've done the data, I've done the work. Here it is. So I think that kind of helps people there when you actually let them see everyone like as a whole. Like, not everyone's the same. Everyone, like you said, like, hey, that person studied for 9 hours and 900, right? I had a person, one of my reps at Wayfair, like, he was a teacher, he spoke French. He would speak to his all his clients for 45 minutes. I thought it was way too long, but that was his style, and it worked. Very successful. Then I had someone that was a killer. Within 7 minutes, he got the job done. There could be two different ways to still get the job done, right? And I think it's up to you as that coach to kind of see that, right? To see like, hey, that person needs that person needs this. And it's up to you as an individual then to kind of see where you are. Like, there's always I think with sales, there's always the art piece, right? Like how smooth you are, da, 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 da. But there's that science piece too as well, which I try to bring in with the like the data. Like, there's a science to this too as well. There's more science than actually art, because if you follow this path, you're gonna get there. Are you? All right, they're following the science. I was like, are you calling the right people? Is it the right date of time? Like, I get really geeky about this stuff, so I'm sorry, but like, that's something because I've done before, and it's just like, and have people frustrated, and then have them see when they actually see it at an individual level, like, wow, like every month, like, this is what I got to do to get this many meetings, to get this many phone calls, like, and then it's that eureka moment. It's like, and that's fun for me. That's like the fun thing for me when I see them, they realize it, like, oh, there's a science to this.
So when is the best time to make that call?
What do you mean?
You said like best time of day, so I was just
I mean, again, data, right? So it depends. So it's like, hey, like, if I'm trying to call you every single day at 7 a.m. and you're not picking up, am I going to continue to call you every day at 7 a.m.? Or am I going to like, hey, I'm going to try one time at 7, one time at 1 o'clock? It was like, hey, maybe he's an email person. Should I use LinkedIn? How often are you using LinkedIn? Like, there's so much like data and geeky we can get involved because it depends on the person. And especially now, things are, honestly, I still think we need more data now just because like everyone's working so differently now, right, than before. Like pre-COVID, it was kind of a lot easier to determine that just because everyone kind of had the same work schedule.
Similar schedule, yeah.
Yeah, but now, like, you know what I'm saying, people
You'll be on break at this time.
Yeah. So it's a lot more difficult now to kind of like figure out that data. And honestly, I think we need just more time. But like pre-COVID, it was a lot easier to kind of determine that.
So, back to like the point at the beginning, and like I'm really curious to hear your take on it because I'm always like I'm giving advice all the time, so I gotta like replenish even like my stock. So for many people who are new in tech, this is my belief, right? Is that they're most likely not gonna have the connections, especially if they're transitioning in. They don't have that network. You're a salesperson. Like, I would be surprised if you did like your job search a different way, right? Because like you're a heavily connected person. You're selling to people all the time. Like, why would you blast? But, and in my mind, it's always that, as a new person, what you need for the most part is someone to take a chance on you, right? But how can someone reverse engineer that strategy if they wanted to go the non-blast route? Is it possible? Can it be done? And how do you do that? Because oftentimes you see one of the elements that you brought in is like, you know, the person. A lot of times there's a skill thing there where you know, like, this guy is just going to do the job. So a lot of the time people don't have that experience or that data behind them that shows that they've done it, or they can't even speak to it. So how does someone still build up that, you know, confidence network, you know, basically like that whole repertoire to be able to still land a role, you know, on the other side of the market?
Mm-hmm. So great question. And I'll go back to myself. If I was like brand new, like fresh out, right? So like what I would do is like, number one, I would make sure there's some type of network you have like already. So it be from school, like what university you went to, if you went to like a boot camp, like your church, you know what I'm saying? Like there's a network that you already have that you might not thinking there's actually there. So like that's always like we call them like low hanging fruit. So I'm gonna start like for me personally, I would go like, hey, everyone in Suffolk, I would go straight to my basketball team. Then I would go to alums that are here, different organizations. That's how I would build like my kind of base. Then two, I would like, I think a lot of folks, especially maybe newer, they're trying to always kind of like network up and manage up. But I was like, hey, if you're all in the same place, can I be a leader with all the young people coming out? Let me network actually with all my peers right here. It's like, hey, I see you're trying to do this. We're all in the same boat. Like, let's actually create a group all together that we're all looking to get this job. So like we're all in the same. It was like, hey, like I got this job here. They're actually looking for someone in this place. Like I think like I'm going to become a leader within my same level. So that's two that I would do. And then three, I think going to events. Like honestly, I do a lot of events going through, but I think going to events, but being like, what value can you bring? Like me speaking, right? So I think huge value and something I always do when I got to go speak or something like that. If I don't have like my crew with me, I need someone that actually can record. So it's like, hey, go to one of these sessions, go to something, videotape that keynote, send it to that person, send it to them. Then now you're bringing value. It's like, hey, loved your session. By the way, I recorded the whole thing. That's valuable right there. So how are you going to stand out there? Definitely. So that's what I would do. If I was like fresh out, like right there, I would like try to build like what type of base I have from like my school, my religion, you know, my athletics, like something there. And then two, like I would stay like networking within my peers and try to become like a leader, like within my peers. And then three, like going to these different events, bringing values to those little keynote speakers, to those like big folks there. That's what I would do.
Okay, masterclass. That is so dope. And it's like, even within like, even, and I say this like, but I think you bring it in a new perspective completely. Like, even when you think like you don't have a lot of value, you have a lot of value to add. Like you can give attention, you can give perspective, you can give your time. Even when there's no skill, where there's nothing else to give, you can give all of that. And like, because we live in a world where it's like, you know, everybody wants a quick 30 minutes. Everybody wants, you know, like, can you be the person who gives something? You know, can you be the person who, and like, even on a place like LinkedIn, I say it all the time, like, is there a thought leader that like you really like, you want them to mentor you? How about every single post they make, like it, comment on it, say it's great. Like, even value at that level, because then when you turn around and say, oh, I need help with this, first of all, your name is not going to be unknown. Because every time you comment, guess what happens? It's showing up. So it's like, I think you nailed it even at the beginning when you said that. How do you give value? Because there's literally like, I always shout him out, my brother Ty Smith. Like, I met him on LinkedIn when I made a video. He really resonated with it. He's put me on so many things. He's always like, he's coming to New York. He's texting me, hey, you want to go to this thing like tomorrow? And for me, like, that's a big, and that's the thing too. It's like, everybody, we all gravitate to givers. Like, we like that. And you can see like, he's not doing this because there's a game. He's doing this because that's who he is. And it's like, you then see all of the things that come out of that because that's who he is. And it's like, it's almost like the most selfish thing that you can do is to be generous. like, like that's the most selfish thing you can do. Just be generous. Like it will just come back.
It will come back. Yeah, I'm a big part of that in karma. And like, to go back on some of your points, when we're talking about, and I'm going to really do this like once I land my other organization. But big part of my strategy actually right now in finding that right organization is actually helping others. Like I have a goal of 5 per day to, like, if I see a role or like, hey, with my network, like I reached out my old like VP. I started, like, she commented on something on a previous client. I was like, hey, I reached out to her. It's like, hey, I used to work with this client. Here's some context I have. Do you want me to make an intro here for you? Like I'm actually, that's part of my strategy to get a job, is helping other people get a job. Is actually, so I'm very unorthodox. You see it from the name. Like, it's just very like different. And I don't think it works for everyone, but like I'm just like very intentional when I do there. And like I'm saying, I'm adding value to other folks, right? Because like now that person too as well, for this is really game, was like, hey, like hit me out. Like how much more willing as people are to help me out now, because it's like, hey, I put them right in touch with the decision maker. I gave them some inside knowledge of it was like, hey, I've been to that office before X, Y, and Z, like ask for this, like how much more willing they to help, or to like, hey, like their sister said something or their aunt said something like, hey, Jevic actually would be perfect for this, or Jevic, I thought of you because of this. Now you're more in their mind too as well.
And you know what's so powerful about that? I think about even to my last role. People don't realize like how far the circle goes. So, the leader of our org used to work with this gentleman. This is my last company, maybe like 20 years ago at Dell. They worked there together. Then they went to different companies. The gentleman went to work at like a big PE firm, work at a small one, everything. 20 years later, she's leading this org. She needs a point person to lead something. And then something that was built 20 years came back to lead this role. And it's so interesting. It's like, that's how long that cycle can go sometimes. It's like, and I think that's something that's also like interesting, because I know, like I said something like a little funny there about like, the most selfish thing you can be is generous. I think the only caveat is don't be transactional. People can smell it. People can see it. And it's like, it's a bad look. But when you give, and one of the things that I realize is that it also doesn't cost anything, because like you see that role anyway, you know that person anyway. So it doesn't cost you anything to just make that connect. And it's like, oftentimes it may not even come back the way you might give it this way and it might come back this way. But just because you're like an air traffic controller, like you're just directing all this traffic, you don't know when it comes back at you. And it's like, it just keeps being this thing. I think that's the beauty of it. It's such a great feeling.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that 20-year run, and I'm hoping I'm going to get to that point. Actually, I have an interview tomorrow because of somebody I managed 10 years ago. I reached out. I was like, hey, you connected? It was like, hey, like I might know some people. No big deal. Didn't think actually it was going to go anywhere. And then he's like, put me immediately in a LinkedIn message with this person, their senior director. They're like, hey, I'm actually not the person you want to speak to, but the person who's actually hiring for the role, I'm cool with them. So let me help you out. So you never know. Like that was 10 years ago, this person. And just like it's cheesy, but being a good person, that's just being a good person. Like that's how it is. Like if I was like, that asshole manager on the floor, probably, that was like, hey, you're not on my team, like get away from me. But like I'm always one too as well. Like even my team, like I love like coaching other people, just coaching in general. So it's like, especially if I'm there late hours, like people would come up to me. It's like, of course, like I'll help you out. Like, what's up? Like what's going through? Like really have that open door policy and just be genuine.
Yeah, that's amazing. So we're coming towards the end of our conversation with Jevic. This has been absolutely amazing. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. We'll take them. But I have a question for you. So, in this sales world, I remember chatting with my friend a few years ago, and he was transitioning actually from, a DevOps role to like a sales engineer role. And like he was really excited about it. And one of the things I said to him, because like he was a little like stuck on like, not getting the most pay from like this new opportunity. I said something to him about, see, take this role. It's a learning opportunity. I feel like after this, you'll write your own checks. And like that has been his reality, right? Based on that opportunity. So sales, I think, is that one place where like there's no ceiling necessarily. From your experience, like what's the earning potential for people in this role, kind of like when they're starting out, kind of like mid-career, and like when they get to like really senior roles?
Absolutely. So it's definitely changed. I think my first role, like out of school, it was like I was like getting paid hourly. It was like 10, 15 an hour. And then like, so that's right. And then 20 times 2080. So that's only really like what, 21, 22,000. And then plus commissions brought me over to 50. And then I felt like I was a huge boss because my next company, they started me at 40K. And mind you, I was still under like 25 at the time, but I still remember this check. I made 126 because I made $80,000 in commission. So I was going through, but now I would say like starting off, like I would go to no organization and talking to like BDRs and SDRs, like that would be like that position. Like you should take nothing lower than 60, like 60K there. And then like you can hit six figures your first year. But I think the earning really potential is like once you get into like enterprise selling and like, because I like my average size deal was like $85,000, right? So like kind of like these contracts, and then one of my biggest contracts was about like 300K. So these contracts that I'm doing now are like houses, like if you think about it, like small houses or like bigger cars. So like like real
I
estate.
like how
So
you
like,
think about it.
yeah, think about it, it's like, yo, this dude signed 300K, like that's a house. Like, they signed for this like one contract. But the potential, like now, like man, you can over 500K, $1 million. Like it's there, right to you. Like it's just the hard you work, the lucky you get. Like sounds cliche, I know, but this is someone that started at $10.50, going through. So now every organization now, like now my base has to start at six figures. Like I'm not even looking at you if we're not even at this thing. Like I don't even like ask about salary now, like, which just sounds crazy to people. Like when I have conversations, because like you see my experience, you see what I've done, like you have to come correct. Like that's not even like money's like
It's
not
not
even
even a
like
conversation.
yeah, it's not even like conversation. Like who's on your leadership team, like who I'm going to be working with, like salary, we're going to get to that, and I'm a negotiator anyway, so like we can talk about that whenever. You're going to have to come correct, because like why would you even be talking right now? But no, the potential is definitely like endless there. But to put like realistic numbers, I think people like starting off, like 60K would be like bare minimum. I would say people that's been in like 3 to 5 years, then your base should definitely be around like 85 to like 100K, like in that range. Lower than that, like no. And then like whatever you do, when like I think it confuses people, like when they say like OTE, so on target earnings. So I know those terms can be like really confusing to folks. Like just about every when you see your salary, double it. That's like the earning potential. Like every sales org, it's mostly like double now. So it's like, hey, your base is like 250, but you can make up to like 500K like bases and commissions, right? On a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis, yearly basis. If you're like me, you'll get some cut on your team too as well, and you can close like your own deals. Because I love that approach for me. Like I like that player coach. That can coach people up. And then next week I don't got it, but I was like, oh, let me go on the phone right now and like close the deal. I can still go on here.
That is so cool. So, in terms of, just tech in general, like, what do you see, like the potential and possibility for there to be, in Black talent, given that this is something that you've been very close to, especially like, with all the initiatives getting rolled back and things like that. Like, what does that future look like?
Yeah, so obviously the big thing is AI, right? So I see there, and like one of my buddies from PlayStation put me on. It's like shout out to him. But there's a lot of companies that are looking for like data people for like AI to get the right answers in right languages, right? So I think that's like really big. Like right now, you're gonna see like a big thing, like anything AI. Like AI is actually, it is a limit. There was a article, I forget if it was Forbes or Time, AI is eliminating a lot of jobs, but it's creating a lot of jobs too right now. So it's
Mm,
actually net positive on what the AI
mm,
effect is doing to the market. People are just talking about the bad, like eliminating this, but it's actually creating more jobs than it's eliminating. So sticking
mm,
with anything like an I think it'll be like really huge. Like in tech, there's always a need for software engineering, developing. I mean, that's your lane. Like you can talk more about that. Uh, but I think like anything like related to AI, if you can get there, go and learn it.
mm,
You're in the same
mm,
standpoint as everyone, right? Especially if you're new.
mm,
It's like, hey, like, because
mm,
it's not a 10-year-old product. So you know, my 15 doesn't mean nothing.
mm,
We're starting at the same standpoint. So like someone you can be entry level 3 years in AI, and you're a product expert because you've been around as
absolutely.
long as it's been along.
Yeah, and that's a big. I think like I've been part of a talk. I think it was yesterday actually, where someone was saying that same thing, and I think it is actually so true. The biggest way to not get left behind is to actually participate and get your feet wet and learn as much as you can. So yeah, that's very valid. We have our first question. Hi, Jevic. What's the best entry level role that will help someone enter your field?
So I always said I would never work in insurance, but honestly, it really helped me. Like number one, like the training there was grade A, like top notch, like sales, like, and I still talk to some of those like trainers to this day, and I've seen where everyone like went to, and then two, like being able to handle, like it can't get no like worse feeling than you're just randomly calling somebody like what's up, what the, like so many f bombs like threw at me there, but it bounced. I thought I had thick skin, but it felt like that thick skin as way possible. So I think it's like really like I think people have talked about like knocking on doors and stuff like that, and I don't knock any of that, no pun intended. But I think like building that thick skin. So once you do something like that, everything's a breeze. Oh, like I'm calling people that want to be called, like this is going through. But I think actually that cold calling experience, or like for me, actually, I had an automatic dialer when I first did there. So like I actually wouldn't know who I'm calling. I just picked up the phone, and within 10 seconds, I would see that person's information. So actually helps my improv too as well. Right there.
Mm,
So I think any field that can help you with like cold calling and improv, but I think really it's like it's training, making sure that org they really value training, and this company like they value training. It's like, hey, we have 3 months training, then a 3 month ramp. We don't expect you to really
mm,
do anything until month seven.
mm,
So that like a
mm,
company that's really invested in training, I think is the key. And if you can get that cold calling experience as well as an improv, I think that's the best way to go.
mm. So you started a podcast, Pass the Baton, not the Patron. What was the uh, what inspired that, and where what was that journey like for you?
Yeah, so everyone knows I'm a huge Drake fan, OVO. We have the same birthday. But one of my favorite artists is actually J. Cole. And there was a
Uh,
song with Wale, he has Beautiful Bliss. Like I thought Hove, you know, passed the baton to me. He just passed the Patron. And it was really from that and one of my buddies that I talked, because these conversations really don't happen as much versus like us just going out and drinking and talking about sports, right? So
mm,
that's how like the name kind of got inspired there. And then like honestly seeing some of these organizations was like, how do I know more like women in leadership and more black talent than you all? You know what I'm saying?
mm,
Like so it's really just like kind of highlight like women in leadership, black women in leadership, black talent that's doing this thing. It's like, hey, it's out there. So yeah, that kind of inspired that right there. And as well, just like uh, it honestly helps me my like continuously like to speak to people and stuff like that, like because I speak to people and do partnerships, so the curiosity part too as well, right? So it gives me a point to like
mm.
be curious with folks, learn about their business, as well as stay in touch with folks too as well. It's like, hey, like you'd be great in a podcast, like come on, like a great way to stay in touch with people.
Absolutely. And I wonder like no, not wonder actually. So anyway, we're coming to the end of the live stream, and this is usually the part where you plug, whatever it is that you got coming up. So uh, go for it.
Man, plug it. What do I have coming up? I'm actually going to be checking out Revolt World. I think it's tomorrow in ATL. So if you're around, say what up, say you listen to podcasts. We can connect. So I got that. October, I'm going to be at Black Men in Tech, Thrive Conference, Fort Lauderdale, November Afrotech. But December, I'm super excited about. I'm going to be in Thanksgiving. I was there like last year, just an attendee. This year, I'm actually moderating, hosting some sessions there. I've been helping that team out there. But yeah, a lot of things coming up right there. But if you see me out and about in real life, there's, just say hello.
Yeah, absolutely. If you see Jevic, wait, there was a way that you did your name. You gotta do that to close us out.
Tech Geek Jevic, because I get a lot of like Jevics. What is this? But yeah, Tech Geek Jevic, that's how you get it. Tech Geek Jevic doesn't sound right, so Tech Geek Jevic, like that's how typically get the first name right.
Yeah, that was really, I thought that was really cool the first time you said that. Yeah, but that's been the show for tonight. I did get a lot of value. I hope you did too. You definitely helped shape my perspective, even how newbies in tech can build and leverage the network that they may not necessarily have going in, and use that to their advantage to secure the roles that they did. I think that was definitely like the biggest point I took away from this. Thanks for coming and sharing your vast knowledge and experience. And I'm really excited for all the work that you do. We have one more working in tech episode for this week. We've been working really hard. This is the second one. But definitely look forward to seeing everyone there. Thanks for rocking with us tonight, and I'll see you again tomorrow night.